It's a shoulder necklace that Dior made, and I got it at a vintage store. I've had it for a while, and we've been holding on to it. And then we created the outfit around it. So we made all of the rest of the outfit in about 6 days, which is insane. And I just wanted her to be the color of money.
I love that. Oh my God. Hello and welcome to the Art of Costume Blogcast. My name is Spencer Williams, and thank you so much for joining us for another bonus episode. I am beyond thrilled today to talk about one of my favorite shows, Pose. Just recently, we watched the series finale, and I am personally devastated without it. However, I am so inspired today as I get the chance to talk with Pose costume designer, one and only, Analucia McGorty. Analucia, welcome to the Blogcast.
Thank you so much. I love your podcast. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you. I feel like I've been stalking you in like a cool way for the past couple of years throughout Pose. I've just been so excited to talk to you.
Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I loved working on Pose. I'm always excited to talk to other people that enjoy it too.
Yes, I miss it so bad already, but I feel like it ended in such a perfect way.
Me too.
So while I'm sad without it, it gave me enough to move on through my life thinking about it, loving it.
I think it ended in just the right way. I think we all fell in love with these characters and they all had such a beautiful ending. It was the right way to end the show, I think. For
sure. And I feel like costume design really played a big part in that, in terms of the series finale too. So we're going to get into that.
Oh, good.
But first I want to dive into your journey leading up to Pose. One thing I loved learning about you before this interview was the amount of work you put in kind of climbing your way up to your role as costume designer on Pose. I mean, you've done various short films. You were also assistant costume designer on The Dark Tower, 911, one of my personal favorites, American Horror Story Hotel. I'm a huge American Horror Story nerd. This to me shows your dedication to the craft, but also your willingness to learn. Can you just kind of talk about your work as an assistant costume designer, shopper, costumer? How did that prepare you for Pose?
Well, I started as a PA, as a wardrobe PA, which is kind of actually really amazing because I'm in Pittsburgh doing a film right now. And the designer that I was a PA for the very first project when I moved to LA is also in Pittsburgh doing a show. So it's really fun to have that complete full circle moment and have coffee and stuff with her.
Wow.
But I think it's super important to start as a costume PA. When people email me or write to me about wanting to dive in and be an assistant costume designer, I say, hold on, slow down.
Oh, yeah.
Start learning the tools of the trade before you get to be the creative being as a designer. You know, you can go to school for film and for fashion design and for different costume design and theater and all these different things. But there's absolutely nothing that will educate you more than working as a PA and working your way up. I also think just as a designer, because I was a PA, because I was a set costumer, a shopper, an assistant designer. I was a supervisor once, which I will never do again. And I have so much to do because it's so hard. But because I've done all those roles, I also understand what their workday looks like. So what my designs is with the knowledge of what everybody's roles are throughout the day. So I understand what it means for the set costumer to maintain a costume or a look. And I also understand like what the timing of those costumes are on set so that I make sure that I'm not keeping everybody else's jobs from the sound mixer to the art director to the gaffer. I think about everybody's job because I've been in these different positions. And, you know, a big part of being a costume designer is time management and budget management. And it's not just purchases, it's also time and production is money. So you have to be able to maintain and be aware of those things. So it plays a big part in working as a costume designer.
Yeah, I feel like it's so important to start. I don't want to say the bottom, but
it's at the bottom.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's important to start from the bottom to work your way to the top to understand every facet that goes into these productions to learn, you know. I recently PA'd on a set and it just like just as an experience to see what it was like. It's like, oh, you have to remember to have this and to do this and work with this person and how you interact with this person. I think it's all important. And I think it's unrealistic for anyone to just think that they could just jump right into assistant costume designing. You really have to know the trade bottom to top.
Yes. And it's like, I tell PAs all the time, you know, it can be frustrating. You could be getting people's coffee. You could be doing returns. You could be, you know, helping keep things organized. Every single thing I learned as a PA, I use as a costume designer. It's just getting you into the brain and into the training of like, write everything down, make lists, communicate with the other departments, communicate with the director, with the writer, with the producers. Like everything you learn as a PA, you still use the exact same things as a designer. Yeah.
I imagine everyone listening to this right now is just grabbing their pencil and paper, writing all these notes down too. You better be. I'm a big Lou Eyrich fan, and I know that you've talked before in the past about how Lou has kind of been a mentor for you. Not kind of, she has been.
Definitely.
For anyone who doesn't know, Lou Eyrich has done costume design for basically every Ryan Murphy production, for Pose, American Horror Story, The Politician, one of my personal favorites.
Glee,
yeah, of course. Can you describe that relationship and why it's been important to you going into Pose?
Yes, definitely. Lou Eyrich is not only one of the most creative designers I know, and also just incredibly intelligent and knowledgeable about filmmaking. She's also one of the kindest people I've met, which in this industry is not always something you get to be witness to have somebody who's so successful and so creative and such a force in our industry, but also just like a really good person. Yeah. And she's a costume producer. I mean, she is another person. She worked her way up, and I guarantee she's working today.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we talk every weekend, every Saturday that we're both working, but she is somebody who loves what she does and puts like blood, sweat, and tears into it. But she also is somebody who loves a community of people around her, and she really likes to help bring up designers who maybe wouldn't have had a choice. You know, when I got to start designing Pose with Lou, it was actually right on the cusp of when streaming was becoming a thing. Nobody had all of the streaming devices they have now. Yeah. And, you know, there was a lot less opportunities. There was less content. I remember when Maisel even was streaming, and I was like, wow, this is so new. This is so different that it's like straight to streaming, you know? Yeah. And so it was harder to get in there. And she would see people working so hard and trying so hard to put their best foot forward. And she wanted to be a part of like bringing new voices and new designers and people who haven't had an opportunity into the fold. And she's really been a big part of that.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And I can attest to that she is one of the nicest people out there, too. She's wonderful. Okay, so let's start to get into Pose. I know we're all excited to talk about it. Going into college, I was heavily interested in and inspired by the 1980s, 90s New York City ballroom scene, which is so weird because I grew up in the middle of nowhere in some desert that no one knows about. But like specifically the Paris is Burning documentary, that's how a lot of people kind of got their first introduction with icons such as Pepper LaBeija, Venus Extravaganza, Octavia St. Laurent. I was captivated by the stories, so seeing Pose in the costumes, it was really kind of like a dream to see all this come to life in like our current day. So I'm curious to know how you approached this project and what kind of research and conversations you immersed yourself in.
Well, I had kind of a similar experience. I definitely am older than you are, but I had a very similar experience growing up in the middle of nowhere. At least I'm not sure if you were excited to get out, but I was very excited to get out of there.
Yeah. Yes. Never went back.
Yeah. And I also loved Paris is Burning. And I just remember just not thinking that there would ever be a time when I got to be in a city so exciting where you got to live as your authentic self in any kind of space. And so that even saying your authentic self was not a part of my vocabulary at that time. And I just couldn't wait to be somewhere where I felt like I could be an expression of who I am. And seeing movies like that and, you know, being so interested in music and really like my whole life was listening to like rock and roll and punk rock and just feeling like I just had so much passion within inside of me that I just wanted to express. And seeing that documentary, it just felt to me like there are so many different people in so many different places, you know, whether it be their gender, their sexuality, their whatever it might be, their interests or their religion, anywhere else, that wanted to be in a place where they felt free. And so that was like the most appealing and exciting thing about New York, because it felt like it was all there. Like I just had to get to New York and then it would all happen. And, you know, that's the fantasy of New York. But if you work hard for it, you can get there. And I think that for me was the core inspiration. I was so excited when I read that pilot. It was just beyond thrilling to have new voices finally being in part of the television and film world. And we really wanted to do it justice. So Lou and I did that first part of season 1 together. And I love research. I'm such a nerd. I really love to research. So it went everything from...
That's the best part.
Yeah, I think it partly is too, that and the fabric and the fitting. Well, it's all good. But yeah, I mean, it went from everything like what you kind of start out doing, which is just sort of like looking up everything you can about the, you know, the documentary or what was happening in the ball culture, to talking to the amazing consultants that we had on Pose, who have been a big part of the ballroom scene, such as Hector Extravaganza, who was a really beautiful person and very loving and very exciting to talk to. He had amazing stories and photos. To just, you know, be able to go to Condé Nast and do research there, based, you know, mostly on the different designers that were inspiring to the ballroom scene, but also the ballroom scene inspired those designers, which was a really interesting part of the research, is that you find out that not only were they being, you know, the houses being named after all these different designers, but a lot of the designers were going to the ballroom scene later in the 80s and taking the ideas of that ball scene and using it as their own, which is kind of a darker part of fashion. But
yeah, absolutely.
You know, it was a really exciting thing to look into all of the different parts of New York, whether it be what film was popular, what music was popular, what, you know, everywhere from like what the palettes were happening in stores, everywhere from, you know, like a department store to, you know, Bergdorf's. New York always has sort of its own color palette, which is different than any other city. So it was a lot of research. I mean, Lou and I just dug deep, like vintage stores and meeting all these incredible people in New York who, you know, have these archives of fashion in their houses that they let us go and see. And we could look at all the page 6 that they kept from the 70s and 80s and see what was. It was really a fun research to get into. Yeah.
So that was actually going to be my next question. I find it so fascinating that you guys worked with consultants on this project. So I was just kind of wondering, how did the consultants, besides influencing the research, how did they kind of walk you through the actual costuming part of it?
It was more about sharing stories, talking about what different categories that they would have at different eras. I mean, that was a pretty important thing. They also had a lot of time with the writers and talking about some of that. Like Jack Mizrahi is a great person to talk about all the different eras and what categories were in every era, because they changed. You know, it changed based on the times. Like in the documentary, you see like executive realness or things like that, but then it kind of morphed as it got later into the 80s and into the 90s. And even like they actually did some storylines about it in Pose, where they talked about how the trans women in the ballroom scene sort of started to get forgotten. Yeah. And it was a more sort of male focused. And it's an interesting thing to do the research and see where that switches. But yeah, it was more about talking about the feelings and some of their stories rather than them guiding us about the fashion or the costuming.
Oh, that's so like really brilliant though, and very important. I feel like you have to do that. And I'm so happy to hear that. So let's now move into season 3 specifically. You were just nominated for an Emmy, so congratulations.
Thanks so much.
So the first 2 seasons take place in the 80s, but season 3 primarily takes place in the 90s, specifically 1994. Was this a challenging transition, or were you excited about it? After doing 2 seasons in the 80s, you would think that kind of just flip over would be a little awkward at first.
I mean, it was actually refreshing to see that we were in a new time period because the characters have grown so much. I mean, if you look at someone like Blanca, she has grown leaps and bounds from when we first see her in that first season. And I think it was important to show them really changing. Like the 80s are so easily identified by the fashion.
Yeah.
The 90s is kind of an interesting challenge because the 90s is back in style. So it's like you want to make sure that it doesn't feel too modern, which is an interesting thing because it's
right.
fashion like repeats itself every 30 years and we're right in the cusp of that.
Yeah.
So it was a fun thing for me to be able to like get into how I wanted to make these characters still feel like themselves and still feel like everybody who has watched the show from the beginning can know, oh, that's a Blanca look, or that's an Elektra look, or that's a, Lulu look, or whatever it might be. But like, you have to also make it feel very 90s. And I loved mid 90s New York. But my biggest challenge is I completely put it on my own shoulders. It's so silly. Nobody told me to do that. I'm like, how can I make things harder? But I really don't like to do a lot of black. I really like to not do very much black in TV and film with my design, unless it's purposeful, like a funeral.
Now that you mention it, I can't really think of much black that you did, now that I'm thinking about it.
It would just be at the funerals.
Yeah.
Or there would be a very purposeful time period or moment for it, like the final episode of Pose, which we had a very strong color theme, which was black, red, pink, and white, which we can talk about if you want. But yeah, I mean, it was, and 90s New York is all black. So I was like, oh God, what did I do?
What did I put myself through?
Oh gosh. But it was good to be able to push myself because it'd be easy to rely on black. Everybody looks fabulous in black. So it's better to like push yourself to create different palettes and different textures, and like sort of within the confines of that, you start to like grow something different, which is sort of the same way I looked at our restrictions with the pandemic, because there were a lot of challenges, especially because I really made such a big commitment about doing 85% small business. And I already worked so closely with small businesses, but that was something that I really wanted to do. So it was sort of interesting that I had a lot of challenges that we weren't able to do certain things, or a lot of our vendors had closed, or we weren't able to access some of them. And from that, new ideas grew, and new vendors came, and new thoughts came in how I designed things. So it's sort of the same process. I
was actually going to ask you about the challenges you might have faced, because season 3 took place entirely during the pandemic. But I don't know that our listeners realize how challenging it might be on a film or TV set, particularly for the wardrobe team. As I've realized firsthand experience. Can you just kind of touch on the extra challenges you have to go through to keep everything safe? And obviously still worked out in the end, but
it did. I mean, I think right when we first got back in August, we were really nervous. I mean, everybody was very, very cautious. And we were up until the end, but, we figured out how to make things work in like a less panicked way. I think in the beginning part, it was just like, I was literally in a hazmat suit. And our fitting room got to be like a floor of a building instead of a room in a building.
Wow.
And, we still wore our shields and masks up until the very end. And we still had, we had some wonderful PAs who would come through after every fitting and clean everything down with bacterial sprays. But, it went from like, you can't touch anything. Everything has to be sealed, to like getting information from like the CDC and from the different research that like fabric can't carry coronavirus. Wow. And for me, I'm so tactile. Like I want to feel everything and I want to touch everything. You could only be next to somebody for a certain amount of time before everybody had to step away. And if we had long fittings, sometimes our fittings are up to 3 hours long.
Wow.
That, it was the 6th episode, the 5th episode with Elektra. She had 17 costume changes, which is a lot. episode.
That's a lot, yeah.
We had like multiple 3-hour fittings, and we would have to take breaks and go outside, take our masks off, take a breath, which never happens in normal, not pandemic world. We just go, go, go. It limited how many people we could have in our area. Like just having water or a coffee, you couldn't have that in the fittings. And it did make things, a little uncomfortable. Like all our actors kept their masks on through the fittings. So sometimes we were photoshopping their faces onto the fitting photos.
Oh, no.
See like what they would look like wearing, because all you see is the mask. Mm-hmm. And it kind of pulls you out of the fantasy of it all. I have some amazing fitting photos with that.
I'm like trying to imagine that. That sounds so funny.
And it was the same thing with our hair and makeup team. I work so closely with hair and makeup. I really think of their two departments and my department as we're all co-pilots in creating the design, and especially on Pose with Sherry and Barry and both their teams. I'm so used to going into their trailer and we talk about things, and Barry's like, come, I want to put the hat on. Why don't you come place it and I'll do the hair around it? And we couldn't do that, and we would even normally have meetings to talk through, like after we'd had our creative meeting with the director, the three of us would sit and talk through everything. And it just made it harder because all of our time was so eaten up with having to go through all the different tasks we needed to do for COVID that we just didn't have that spare time to sit in person. We still had meetings, but it was usually like Zoom meetings, which is impersonal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds so tough and hard. I hope everyone realizes how hard costume designers and people in the industry altogether are working to make all of our favorite projects come to life. But also at the same time, it makes it all that much more impressive that the season 3 of Pose came out the way it did, because it was, I think, my favorite season. It was just so brilliant the way you guys did the costume designing. So
thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's definitely my favorite too. I think too, the scripts were so beautiful, and we all have just become so close. Like everybody became really close, that finding out it was the final season, it just made us all want to just put everything we could into it, because we just cared so much about it. Yeah. And it's beyond, I love what I do. And I think what costume designers and wardrobe people do is very important storytelling. And I think it's sometimes challenging for people because they think, what could be so hard? Everybody wears clothes every day. They don't really see it as what it is, which is storytelling and art. Yeah. And, we work you saw it. We work 12 to 16-hour days, and we just love it. It's our whole life. But it was more than that. The show represents so much more than that. And to be a part of something that has changed the culture, that has changed our industry, that has opened up so many people and changed a lot of people's lives by representation and just showing fully realized characters is beyond anything I could have imagined doing. So we wanted to give our entire souls over to this season. And I think we did a pretty good job, to be honest.
I think you did. It reads that way, the entire from beginning to end. It just feels like they put everything they had into these last few episodes.
And God, my team just really, every single person who worked on this show made such a difference in my life. And we all still text, like we were all, my entire set costumer team, background team, I've been texting with them all weekend. Like we just all just want to be in each other's lives. All the, Nikki Smith, who is a costume designer from season 2, we're super close and talk all the time. I mean, it leaves a really lasting impression, this show.
Yeah, and the values of family that you learn through Pose are realistically translated into your own life, which I think is pretty awesome.
It is, yeah.
So I'm excited now to just talk about individual characters and their moments in season 3. So first, we have to talk about my favorite character, and I think a lot of people probably share the same ideas as me. Elektra in season 3. She comes into a little bit of money in season 3. Her costumes are just brilliant, out of this world, perfect, love it, beautiful. Can you just talk about costuming Elektra in this final season?
Oh, God, I miss her.
I do too.
I was just telling this story the other day. One of my favorite things is hearing Janet Mock say to the actress Dominique, "Where is Elektra going?" That was always my favorite thing. Like, where is it going? Because it was just so over the top. Yes, this season she comes into some money, which was a fantastic creative meeting with Ryan Murphy, because he was like, I just want her to be over the top. And I just was like, more?
Yeah, wait a minute. Over the top. She's been over the top. But
I want dripping diamonds. I want furs. And I said, okay, we're going to go for everything I could possibly put into it. We did. I was really excited to, I don't know. I mean, to find a way to push her to even the next place. And, she's very Dior. She's very Oscar de la Renta. She's Elektra, but oddly, she has her own style, but also is so classic. Like everything she wears could be, a Dior silhouette to something from the 20s, like this beautiful white fur coat. It is so much fun to dress her. I mean, she just looks so good in everything. It's also who Elektra is as a character is so much fun, which she is this gorgeous being with a heart of gold, but she never wants anybody to know that she has that heart. But it shows all over her. She could wear all black and be just as, exquisite, but she's full of color and interesting silhouettes, and she likes to make things, she likes to challenge people's view of what wealth could be. So that's sort of what you see in this picture. That one look, the upper right, the green look, for the bridal dinner and slash strip club. Yeah. I wanted, that's a Dior, it's a shoulder necklace that Dior made, and I got it at a vintage store, and I've had it for a while, and we've been holding on to it. And then we created the outfit around it. So we made all of the rest of the outfit in about 6 days, which is insane. Wow. And I just wanted her to be the color of money.
I love that. Oh my God. One of my favorites is actually, I believe you called it the Chrysler Building look.
Oh yeah.
That was, I think it was like episode 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And I was already like, wow, we're just really going there this season. It's such a good look.
It's so funny to think she just had that in her closet ready to go. I just thought that was the funniest part. Yeah, it's a little, they're like love notes or sort of like Easter eggs or sort of just my sweet kind of wink at an actor or our city of New York. And I just feel like New York really went through it during the pandemic. And so that was just, she was the beacon of strength in that. And the architecture of New York, and especially the Chrysler Building, is one of my favorite buildings in New York. And I really wanted to show some of that. And it's a little bit of, there's some different painting influences in that, but that was a really fun one to do. You see that her cape is the little windows and the hat is the top.
It's so stunning.
Yeah, it's really fun. She killed it in it too. Like her walk, I just was, seeing it come to life when we actually start filming it is the best part. The ballroom scenes, filming the ballroom scenes was the best part. It was like being in some sort of Fantasia. I can't explain it.
So I have a question about that. That's probably obvious. So like when you're coming up with like the Chrysler Building costume, is something like that in a script, or you're just kind of, that comes from your own mind? How does that work?
It depends. Sometimes it is. The feather dress, it just said she's in a couture feather ensemble. So it'll have something described like that. Or like even last season, the Marie Antoinette, it just said she comes out with a guillotine in Marie Antoinette costume. Okay. So it might have some description of what it is. For the Chrysler Building, it just said she, comes out looking like exquisite Elektra.
Looking like Elektra.
Yeah, exactly. So that just sort of comes from my creative brain. And I talk about this a lot, but one of the most amazing parts about Pose was working with Ryan Murphy, Janet Mock, Stephen Canales. They trusted me. And that is the best feeling in the world, because I would come to them with these insane ideas. They would say yes. And they would let me really, like the blooming dress for Angel, that wasn't scripted. It just said a beautiful wedding dress. And I was like, can I please make this dress bloom? And they were like, okay.
Yeah, go for it.
and that's all right. So, it is a really good feeling to have your team and your boss pretty much really trust that you can pull it off and that it will look good. And it just frees you to do even more and to get bigger and bigger. And that's why I think I really was able to push everything this season, because I felt like I had a safe space to create in, and it felt great.
I love it. I just don't even want to see these pictures of Elektra go. But let's move on. The heart and soul pose has to be Evangelista house mother Blanca, played by 2021 lead drama actress Emmy nominee MJ Rodriguez.
Yes!
The first transgender performer to pick up an Emmy nomination. I love Blanca so much. I love her looks in season 3. It's very kind of like sophisticated. I love seeing her in the nurse scrubs too. Like, that's just so fun. Can you just talk about dressing Blanca, but then also maybe touch on MJ's nomination too?
It is unreal. I mean, my assistant designer from Pose is with me on the project I'm working on now, which is the film that Billy Porter is directing.
Oh, wow.
So, to say we were screaming up and down with Billy, but also about Michaela J. It was just, I mean, I was very excited for our own nomination, and I feel so honored, and what an incredible thing to happen. But really, MJ, I just am so excited, and is so well deserved. She is a brilliant actor and a brilliant performer, and she is just, I'm just so excited for her. I will get emotional sometimes.
I'm right there with you too whenever I think about it.
She was Blanca as a character, who's very different than MJ, although they both have the same heart. Was a lot of fun to dress. I remember when Lou and I were starting to put looks together for her and trying to figure out who she was. It was very much on the page of exactly like the kind of person that Blanca was, which was that she was somebody who was very determined, who had a real set of morals and had a list of things that she wanted to accomplish in her life. So it was very scripted that she was sort of this tough cookie with a heart of gold. And we wanted to make her this sort of tomboy, no nonsense, tough girl, but she's beautiful. I mean, it's, she's very feminine. She's very gorgeous. She has the best legs in the business. So we always wanted to show this off. Everything especially this season, got very short. Yeah. But season 3, especially, she's in love, and she has the support of her family, but she also has a support of a partner who really believes in her. But the biggest thing is that she's starting to believe in herself. Not just in her children and creating a house, and not just in the ballroom community, but she really is like blooming and becoming the woman that she was set out to be. So we wanted to show that. Her looks this season are definitely more romantic. Mm-hmm. There's the colors started to soften. You'll see there's a lot more pinks and a lot more whites. Seen below on where she's in her nurse's outfit, that's from the final episode. And we really did a lot of gray, white, black, red, and pink. The red was signifying AIDS, which a lot of Craig Tell's costumes were in, and the pink is a signifying of hope. And
that's amazing.
Was a lot of part of it was about death, and white as well. And after, I guess everybody's seen it. After, it's so strange to be able to say Craig Tell.
Whoever is listening to this podcast has seen the show.
Okay. Yeah.
This is a spoiler. Okay zone.
Yes. After Prey dies, you see Blanca wearing a lot of pink and red because she wants to carry Prey Tell's memory with her. And probably one of my favorite shots that Stephen Canales set up for that last episode is when we see Prey Tell going down the hallway in that white kimono with the pink underneath, and he goes to take his makeup off and goes and passes away. And you see after he's passed away and after Blanca's in the hospital and she's at home and his mother comes to see her, you see a pretty bookended matching shot of Blanca walking in the opposite direction.
Wow.
In the same white flowing shirt. because she is able to walk away from the death and live her life. So it was, there's just so many shots and things like that maybe other people don't see, but for us as storytellers and as creative people, being able to work with another artist like Steven and Andre Schwartz, our DP, to create that moment for us was really what it was all about. We want to share that beauty in those moments with everybody, but it's that opportunity of working with each other to create moments like that. So.
Wow. You just mentioned some things that I feel like I didn't even notice because there's just so much emotion that went into it. I feel like I was really just, I was a mess watching it, so I need to go back.
God, I was a mess while we were shooting it. We all were.
I could imagine. One of my favorite Blanca looks from this season was that photo at the top left, this white, I don't know how you describe it, I guess white shoulder piece. How would you describe it?
She's,
I'm like, I forgot the word.
It's like a little shell, but
yeah,
I'm like laughing because this is sort of inspired a little bit by Cinderella.
Okay.
But also by Barbie. There was Barbie when I was a kid that I was obsessed with. And this is sort of what the dress looked a little bit like.
It does kind of give like fairy godmother vibes now that I'm like really thinking about it.
Exactly. And that's sort of what Pray Tell was. He was sort of like the fairy godmother, which is interesting with Cinderella. But,
she's literally fairy godmother now.
Something that happened later. It wasn't supposed to be connected, but we wanted her to look like a queen, and we wanted her to look just stunning and beautiful. And I really love MJ's shoulders and neck. I think it's so beautiful. I'm always trying to show it off because I just think it's one of my favorite parts of her. And so this was I just thought she looked beautiful. There was no other reason. There was nothing scripted here. She was just supposed to be at the ball. I just wanted to make something that felt really beautiful. And I thought that this would bring all of the light to her. And it literally does. It's iridescent. So all the light glows through her makeup and everything. I just thought it was pretty.
I think it's beautiful. It's like she's the queen of the moment, which happens to be what that scene ends up being about.
Exactly.
So we were just talking about Billy Porter's character, Pray Tell. I think after our conversation, it's quite the understatement saying Billy Porter had an emotional season. But I feel like the costumes are really have to do with the storytelling of Pray Tell's character. Mm-hmm. They really kind of show the mood, how he's feeling in that moment. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Can we just talk about, just even looking at these photos, sometimes they're very vibrant, sometimes they're very dark and reserved, or using white, like you said. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts into Pray Tell's season 3 wardrobe.
Yeah, I think the white, especially as a connective tissue throughout the whole season. Mm-hmm. Episode 4, which is incredible, when he goes home and goes back to see his mother. We really made sure that the young Pray Tell's palette and the looks that he wore was very a mirror of the older Pray Tell when he's in that environment. So they're both in the white when they're in the church and sort of finding God and finding themselves. And Pray Tell's always been the preacher of the ballroom scene. He's the one who's up on the stage and preaching to everybody about love, and it's just a very different experience than the church that he had experienced and the suffocating feeling he had from that. So we wanted him to feel free, and there's a lot of interesting things about white and death and freedom and hope, and it just felt like a really beautiful way to send him off. And he also is oddly, though, if you didn't know the show, you might look at these photos and not think that this is calm for Pray Tell. We sort of brought him down a little bit. He wasn't quite as glamorous as he was maybe in the second season or in the first season. He was depressed. He was going through a lot of struggle knowing that he was dying. And we really wanted to show him his version of depressed, which is still pretty fabulous. But
right?
You see him in that last episode when he comes strutting down the street before he goes into the choir with I was going to say Delon, but with Ricky, and he's just back to his sparkle. He's got that amazing Vogue jacket that I found. He's got like his sequined hat on. He's got his cane again. And he's looking like old Prey-Tall from season 2. You know, he looks fantastic. And you think there's like that moment of hope where you think he's going to be okay.
Absolutely. That's what I was thinking every time. Like, oh, wow, look at this costume. Like, maybe he's feeling better.
Yes, you know? Exactly. Yeah. But it was really fun to kind of bring him into a place of calm in a strange way, and trying to figure out like what his version of calm is. But I really love that middle photo with he and Blanca, because that really shows what we were doing with the palette.
Yeah, it's the Ain't No, oh my gosh, I just totally messed up the song.
Ain't No Mountain High Enough.
There you go. I don't know why all of a sudden I was like, wait, what? One of my favorite
Wasn't
songs.
that amazing when it rained? I was like, when we read that script, we were like, what?
Yeah, that was a moment. I mean, that could have been the entire season. I still would have been like, okay, that was amazing. So
yeah.
But yeah, talk about that scene for a little bit.
Oh my gosh. Well, it was scripted and we were like, oh my gosh. And then Ryan and Steven were like, what if there's a tearaway? And I was like, oh, that would be fun. And they were like, what if it's a double tearaway? And I was like, okay. What if it's a double tearaway? And I was like, oh gosh.
Okay, hold on.
But we figured it out, and it really was such a great scene. The choreography was so good.
So
James
beautiful.
did such an amazing job. It looks phenomenal. They were, we were very lucky to have 2 performers who are also great dancers. So they just got it like immediately. Yeah. I mean, they had like 1.5 rehearsals before they did that, which is so crazy to me because I could never imagine doing it. And we did like 1 rehearsal with Rain. But we really had to do, one kind of interesting thing is we had to do that scene as the very last scene we ever did on that stage, on that set, because that just, it warps the floors and it kind of ruins that set. So it was a fun way to end All Balls Forever, is to do that scene. And it was choreographed. And then at the end, when they both started spinning and MJ did that death drop, it was just like, there's a video of us all behind the monitors watching it. And we all start screaming, like the whole crew starts screaming and clapping because that wasn't even something we knew she was going to do. It was magic. I say that, but it really was magic.
No, it was magic. I would do anything to just be like a fly on the wall in that moment watching this scene. And like you mentioned, Blanca's wearing pink and Prey-Tall's wearing red. So now that you mention it, now I'm just going to keep thinking about that every time I watch pose. So then finally, the last character we have to talk about, I will not let you go without talking about Angel and Papi's wedding. So beautiful. I'm not even a big wedding person, but like this is the most beautiful wedding I've ever seen ever.
Yeah.
You create this dress for Angel, but then also I love that everyone in the wedding also got to wear a bridal dress too. It was just so beautiful. You have to talk about this scene.
Well, that was definitely scripted, and that was all Janet Mock. She directed this episode. She wrote that part for the girls to all have their wedding moment. It was so beautiful to the community, and it was so much fun to do those fittings. That was a fun challenge to find that many wedding dresses in a pandemic that were 90s, but looked very new and beautiful and fashionable, because some 90s wedding dresses are so evil that anybody would design something that ugly.
This sounds like the impossible challenge, but
it was really hard, and I am so grateful for my incredible shopper Rita, because she really dug in and found those dresses, man. She just got so many of them. But it was every single fitting with every single person who was in that scene was like a principal fitting. We really wanted them to feel good. We wanted them to feel beautiful and sexy and like they had the opportunity to have their day. So we really worked with all of our background actors, our day players, with our principal actors to make sure they all felt really gorgeous and fabulous. Angel's dress was something I was so thankful to India to let me, do so many fittings to get this dress just right.
You had to.
Yeah. to attach mechanics to her leg that had a remote. She was really great during this whole process. And I felt very supported in my partnership with them to like create something for Angel that was so over the top. And that was a very long shooting day. And they were just, every single take was gorgeous. Every single take, we were all just, every time she walked down that aisle, we were like, and we did that so many times in different ways, but it just looked beautiful. The production designer did an incredible job designing this space, and all of the flowers were just over the top. I mean, when you walked into it while they were still setting it up, everyone just got very, very, very quiet, which for a film crew is not normal. It's really so loud until we're shooting and then everyone's quiet, but It was incredibly beautiful. And, Janet asked for that bridal moment. She's like, I want them to be in like a 40s wedding robe. And I said, oh, we can do that. You're calling my name. So that part was really fun. And we did, Angel's in so much white throughout that whole episode, just like, like any bride would be in, with her girlfriends going to the bachelor party. That strip club scene was so funny and so much fun to shoot. And Miss Orlando just had me crying, laughing throughout every part of it. But I also really had a good time doing Papi's wedding outfit. His vest we custom made so that the flowers matched the flowers on her dress. And then his son, Beto, has a matching vest, and we made them bow ties. We really wanted him to feel handsome and feel really beautiful in that scene as well. Billy Porter's Norma Kamali suit was actually... So I became friendly with Patti LuPone when we were doing season 2.
Of course.
And she invited me to her house in Connecticut and gave me her wardrobe. She was like, I'm not going to wear this anymore. Please take it. And so that Norma Kamali suit is something that Patti LuPone wore to the Tony Awards in 1994.
Oh, my God. How did I not know this?
I know. Well, I don't know if many people know that. I sent her a message. She was laughing. But I mean, heavily tailored. We had to add a lot of fabric in there to get it to fit. But it was still like a fun kind of like wink at what was happening in the world at that time. I just wanted this moment to be the fairy tale that everybody had been waiting for and that everybody deserved to see. They really needed this moment.
It was this was just such the perfect bow that wrapped up Pose as a whole. It just made everything feel complete. It made everyone feel warm. It made me feel warm on the couch. Yeah. It was just so beautiful and so happy.
It really was. Yeah.
It felt like I was watching my own friend getting married. I was just so happy for everyone involved in the show at this moment.
I was too. And I really think that's what Janet wanted everyone to feel. I think she wanted everyone to feel joy.
I totally see that. And I love Lulu in the pink, too. Such a brilliant color on her.
We did Blanca, Lulu, and Elektra in shades of pink that are within the flowers of Angel's dress. And they're the only ones in pink. But she looked exquisite. I mean, Lulu, she is so gorgeous. Haley is so beautiful. Dressing her is so much fun because she's just unbelievably beautiful. And she really... is another character that really wears clothes very well. You could put her in anything. I always would crack up when we would get a script and it would talk about, she's not looking good because she's depressed. And I'm like, okay, well, that's actually because she looks good, in overalls and a tank top. So it would take her a lot more time to make her look down than it would to make her look up.
It's so funny. That's a challenge. It's more over the top or not look good. I don't know. Well, I love talking about Pose with you so much. I could talk forever and ever and ever. I don't want it to end. But just as a final note, I just want to hear from you. The Art of Costume is all about highlighting costume designers and their brilliant work and their because costume designers are really ones who bring a lot of our favorite stories to life. So just from you, I just want to hear, why costume design? Why do you think costume design is so important as a craft?
Well, I feel like I've said it a lot, but it's storytelling. A lot of actors talk about and directors talk about not really seeing the story or the character until they see the actor in their full wardrobe, hair, and makeup. And we are what helps them create that space. It's not just words. It's not just emotion. It's not just lighting or camera work. It's how the person looks in the environment. And so what we do is important, and it should be valued, and we should, as artists and as people, union members and people who have families and have friends and have lives, and we give so much of that up to put ourselves so fully into this, should be recognized. And I feel like we are all working really hard to try to make that equality known. And I hope that that happens soon.
I couldn't agree more. You said it so beautifully. Thank you so much, Analucia, for joining me for this interview. I had so much fun.
Oh, I'm so glad. I love your podcast. I'm so excited that you have interviewed so many of my favorite designers. And so keep going, and I can't wait to see you on set someday.
Of course, I can't wait. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Yes.
Bye.
The Art of Costume Blogcast is hosted by Elizabeth Joy Glass and Spencer Williams.
Produced by Elizabeth Joy Glass with associate producer Spencer Williams.
Our sound design and engineering is done by Daniel White.
Follow us on Instagram at The Art of Costume Pod.
Or visit theartofcostumeblogcast.com for all blogcast updates.
For more costume reviews, deep dives, and interviews, visit theartofcostume.com.
A blog dedicated to highlighting the best in costume design.